背負い投げ、背負い落とし、打ち落とし、払い腰、跳ね腰、大外刈り、小外刈り、小外掛け、大外車、内股すかし、きびす返し、巴投げ、俵返し、カニバサミ、山嵐、浮き技、小内刈り、大内刈り、肩車、横車、切り込み腰、袖突っ込み腰、払い切り込み足、束目返し、先分かれ。
Down Nicolet Avenue in downtown Minneapolis. It's a big pedestrian mall.
Uh-huh.
And they have a Church of Scientology right there. And I was walking by and they were doing free stress tests. And I walked by and they said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure." And I sat down. And he says, "This is a stress test." And I said, "Well, how does it work?" And he says, "Well, just put the cans in your hand." And they're, two little, they look like pop cans, but they're solid.
Yeah.
And, anyway, he says, "Okay," he goes, "you don't have to tell me what you're thinking about, but just think about your family." And so I sat down and I thought about, Mom and everybody else. And it wasn't, too stressful or anything. And the needle didn't move. And he goes, "Well, what did you think about?" And I said, "Oh, I thought about my mom." And he said, "Well, Are you stressed out?" And I said, No, I love my mom very much. We get along good. And he said, "Okay," he goes, "I want you to think about something that really bugs the shit out of you." And I said, "Okay." And I thought about something that really bugged the shit out of me, too. The point where I wouldn't tell him, even as a stranger,
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about it, and I watched the needle, and the needle didn't move. And he goes, "Okay." And I'm like, "How does this work?" And I noticed every time I talked, the needle would move, or every time I set it on my leg, the needle would move. And I said, "Well, this is just kind of going off vibrations, isn't it?" And he said, No. He says, "Well, of course it does when you talk, but when you sit and think, it's supposed to read your stress." And I said, "Well, it's not really working then, because I thought about something really stressful." And he says, "No," he says, "that'll happen." He goes, "I want you to try one more time." So long story short, he made me think about stressful things like 8 times.
Uh-huh.
And the needle never moved. And finally I saw him messing with the dials, and the needle jumped, and I said, "You just messed with the dials." And he said, "Well, I was just adjusting it." And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about Scientology, how it works." I said, "I'm always hearing, bad things about it in the media. What's your response to that?" He goes, "Well, it doesn't bother me because those people don't know what they're talking about." And I said, "Well, like, in what degree?" And he says, "They just don't know what they're talking about." And then he launches into how I should buy a copy of Dianetics, and he shoved a copy in my hand, and I said, "Well, that's great." He goes, "What's $21?" And I said, "Oh, I'll pass. Do you have any brochures?" And he said, then he sticks a clipboard in my face and says, come to this seminar. And I said, "But you never really explained how the stress test didn't work." And he goes, "Oh, but it did. It reads your stress. It does." So, anyway, long story short, they're very personable people. They're not weird like maybe a Jehovah's Witness would be.
Have you heard of bull baiting? That's what they do when they're trained to, basically attack people verbally if they ever mention anything bad about Scientology, but they're trying to recruit you, so they're not using that strategy. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess what I gathered from, I think he was trying to talk on a level with me. He's like, "Dude, what bugs the shit out of you?" And I was like, well, "I'm not a gangster," And it was just funny because all these are just little aluminum cans, and it's just a little thing. And I said, "This is kind of like a polygraph test, except it works worse than a polygraph test." Because it's just got this little needle that just reads every little thing. And he told me when the needle moved to the right, it would show stress. And it just never really moved at all unless I spoke or unless I touched the can down onto my leg.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting down. Anyway, it was kind of interesting. And I said, "Well, I kind of failed this test, didn't I?" And he said, "Well, no, you didn't fail it. Nobody fails it. And it's all about managing stress." And I said, "Well, I guess I don't have any then?" He said, "Well, everybody has stress." So I said, "Well, I guess I'm managing it well." And he says, "No, Dianetics is the mind and the body, and it is a religion, and it's how we manage stress." And I said, "Well, do you have stress?" And he says, "Well, everybody has stress." And I said, "Well, do you think you would manage it better than most people? And he goes, well, I can't speak for most people. And I said, I don't really get what you're trying to sell to me. And I said, other than this book. And he said, well, you know, come on by our seminar. And I said, okay, thanks. And then now I'm going to the park again. So I'm not a very confrontational person, and I didn't even give him a whole lot of shit. But
well, you didn't really mock him either. You know what I mean?
I didn't mock him. He's, you know, got something to do, and he probably deals with enough people who just sit down just to give him shit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I thought I asked him some legitimate questions, but
yeah. I don't blame the Scientologists. I blame L. Ron Hubbard. He said he was going to start a religion to get rich. I mean, he's been quoted. I mean, yeah. But I don't blame the Scientologists. They just got sucked in, and to learn that about Lord Xenu and all that cost $200,000.
Well, one thing I never got around to asking him, because I knew I was wasting his time, and he might have been able to recruit some people who, you know, might have been legit. But when I asked him about it, one of the things I wanted to ask him was, anyway, he was a nice enough guy. He said that I asked him if he'd been practicing long, and he said that he started in the early 80s, fell out in the early 90s, and then got back into it. So it was interesting enough, but I guess what I got a kick out of more than anything was him going, come on, just think of something really stressful.
Well, he's probably wanting your hands to tremble. And your hands didn't tremble. I'd like to take apart one of those things if I could get a hold of one, just to see how it works, because I know electronics, you know, so...
Well, I mean, I could almost tell you. And I asked him, I said, how does this work? And he said it just reads the electricity that your body emanates, and it's just kind of like one of those things that you set your hand on, and the static electricity makes your hair go up, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like that, except it didn't have a spark or anything. It was such a low level of electricity.
You drank any coffee today? I bet your hands weren't trembling at all because you...
Yeah, I drank coffee this morning, but I just had a couple drinks with lunch, too, so I don't know. But it clearly wasn't working for him, I guess, is what I felt bad about. And he didn't really have a logical explanation as to why it wasn't working. And he had a hard time giving me a very clear explanation as to how this related to Scientology. So, anyway, it was...
Well, they don't want to tell you anything until you've been kind of... It's a cult. They use cult-like propaganda methods.
I didn't want to be combative with the guy and get in his grill, because he was a nice enough guy. And But there were a lot of people trying it, so it was just funny how he kept going, think of family, and then he'd go, okay. And then he would ask me what I thought about, and I said, well, I thought about work. And then he goes, okay, he goes, well, does work stress you out on a day-to-day basis? And I go, no, not really. And he goes, well, think of something really stressful. And I did, and he goes, well, what'd you think about it? And I said, well, it was so stressful, I can't tell you about it, so I'm really surprised that needle didn't move.
I think they invented the religion. When did L. Ron Hubbard do it? The 60s, or was it, I don't know.
Yeah, when he was writing science fiction books and shit.
But anyway.
LRH. I should have said, well, did LRH say anything about my T levels? Or
your what levels? P levels?
My DOUCHEBAG levels? Because yours seem to be pretty high.
This is something that's going on. All my buddies on YouTube have been real outspoken about the Scientology thing. But I haven't made any videos on it because I don't exactly have a crack set of lawyers to defend me.
You hesitate to put so it's good, and evil came from above. Death, peace, a corner of love. Being the gates and they can't come in. Good on a fake, a lot more sin. Straight on a boat till I break the road. I wanna lie till I break the kick, no matter. I'm the one. Got a religion. I'm the one. I couldn't tell my night.